you were on your way to lunch. Is that what you were saying? And
yeah. Let me, and Erica, let me just show you. I think at 11 I showed you this as an example. The judge handed out an 89-page, pretty much a booklet of instructions, and I taped together just 40 of the pages. And Erica, you are just seeing 20 pages. So as you can imagine, this is what the jury was told that they had to look at when they went into that room to weigh in all the evidence. There were 89 pages of instructions, and so the jury was told to take a look at the evidence. They were told that they could not base their decisions on bias or sympathy. They were even told that even though Mark Ray Leonard did not take the stand, that was his right not to do so, and so they could not consider that at all. And they were also told that they had to weigh each of the criminal charges one at a time on their very own merit. So for this jury to come back just in 3 hours after 20 days of evidence and testimony and an 89-page jury instruction, I think most of the people here are stunned. In fact, all crews are wrapping up to go to lunch before we were told that there is a verdict in this case.
And I want to remind viewers, or tell viewers who are just now joining us, this is breaking news. A jury has reached a verdict in the Richmond Hill trial, the Mark Leonard case. After just 3 hours of deliberations, the jury has come back with a verdict. We are waiting for that verdict to be read, which we're told would probably be in just several minutes from now, so we will stay on the air until we do know that verdict. I want to go back to Rafael Sanchez live in South Bend, who has been covering this case from the very beginning. Rafael, I know that you have become very close with many of these families in the Richmond Hill subdivision. Of course, we don't know what the verdict is, so we don't know what they're going to be feeling at this moment, but can you tell us what they've been feeling just for this case to even go to trial finally?
You know, I think the families, and I can't speak for them, but I think I know the Richmond Hill neighborhood better than I know the very own neighborhood where I live. I know their addresses more than I know my aunts and uncles' addresses. I've been able to cover the story so long, and I think they've been waiting for this day. They've been waiting for justice. They've been waiting to hold the people accountable. They're ready for all of this, the cameras, the reporters, to really go away. They want to go back to a normal life, but they understand that something horrific happened in their neighborhood on November 10th, 2012 at 11:11. When that home at 8349 Field Fairway just exploded. And on that day, Erica, I know that's almost 3 years ago, it was a beautiful November day. People were out with their children. People were out in their hot tubs. It was just an unordinary day for being November in Indiana. So that really just was a day that really just stuck in their mind, especially when that explosion occurred and you saw a neighborhood that was just in shock. They thought a plane had crashed in their neighborhood. They thought that because Greenwood Municipal Airport is nearby. Some people thought a meteorite had hit a home. Other people just had no idea what had happened. The initial thought was that it was maybe natural gas, but it wasn't a natural gas leak in that neighborhood. It was the fact that the home at 8349 Field Fairway was building up like a ticking time bomb. And at one point, I'm going to break away from what I'm saying because now the prosecution has arrived. We can see now that Denise Robinson and Mark Hollingsworth had arrived here, which means we will not get to a verdict until they get into the courtroom. But these have been the two lead prosecutors on this case, and they are now walking into the courtroom here in South Bend, getting ready to hear the verdict from the jury of 12. I'll just point out there are 16 jurors, 4 were alternates. They were allowed to listen in to the proceedings, but they were not allowed to in any way to vote or to in any way chime in on the discussions. But back to Richmond Hill, I mean, the folks were just traumatized. We saw the best in people, though. On the night where people were running for their lives there in Richmond Hill, they were also going door to door to see if their neighbors were okay. So that's sort of the dynamic that we have in this courtroom. People are now tightly bonded forever because of what happened in that neighborhood, but they're also looking for this to be over. And we know that there still can be, in this case, possibly 4 other trials. Bob Leonard, Mark's brother, goes on trial in Fort Wayne in January. That could also be a lengthy trial unless the decision that comes out of this courtroom today changes that. We also know that there's another man, 2 other men, Glenn Hultz and Gary Thompson, who were arrested and released and also facing their own separate charges in connection to the blast. They were arrested just this year after Monserrate Shirley's plea agreement. So we know that the families still have a lot to think about, still have a lot to wonder what will happen. But I think seeing justice today in their minds will begin that will be that recovery moment. You know, this jury had a lot to consider, and one of the most emotional days was when the firefighters, Erica, came to this courtroom. Many just broke into tears as they talked about how they tried to save Dion Longworth from that home that collapsed on top of him. The embrace between firefighters and the families of Dion and Jennifer Longworth speaks for itself about their special bond. Lieutenant Dean Teagarden and firefighter Richard Shervin attempted to pull Dion Longworth from his collapsed home. Shervin testified that he could hear Dion yell, "Help, I'm here," before reaching him. Shervin says he managed to grasp Dion's hand through an opening about the size of a basketball, but was unable to pull him out because 2 floors of debris surrounded Dion, who kept telling Shervin, it's hot, get me out." Shervin, with the help of Lieutenant Teagarden, removed as much stuff around the opening to rescue Dion. Shervin told the jury there was not enough time. As the flames approached, the firefighters were forced to pull away. The families know they did their best, and they showed it with hugs on the courthouse steps. And that's really the kind of testimony and evidence that this jury heard. And remember, this case was moved from Marion County. Downtown Indianapolis to South Bend is about 2 hours, 45 minutes, according to GPS. But during jury selection, the people here in St. Joe County, those 16 people, they had an idea what happened back in our neck of the woods there in Richmond Hill on the south side of Indianapolis. They just didn't have all the facts. So this jury, though we had a change of venue, which means, of course, that it was moved to a different county to give Mr. Leonard a fair trial, they were where something really bad happened on the south side. And when they heard testimony like that from firefighters, from neighbors, from people, that hit a chord, I'm going to presume, and that is why, after just 3 hours, this jury is ready to say, we have a decision on this case. Moments ago, you saw Denise Robinson, the deputy prosecutor for the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, walk in with Mark Hollingsworth, the defense attorneys for Mark Ray Leonard, both Diane Black and Dave Shercliffe, already in the courtroom, and we have crews inside as well. So as soon as the judge gathers everyone and we begin to hear the verdicts in each of the cases, they'll be read 1 to 53. Erica, of course, will bring those to you live as we wait now to see what this jury has decided after 20 days of testimony and evidence here in South Bend.
Yeah, Raphael, as we continue to wait for this verdict to be read, you were talking about this from the very beginning in Richmond Hill, and I think this is one of those stories where everyone remembers where they were on the day that happened, on the evening that happened, and what they were doing when word of some kind of explosion started to spread throughout the community. I remember I had just left dinner and I started getting all these text messages of some kind of bang or explosion, and then the days following that just trying to get to the bottom of what happened, as we are still trying to get to the very bottom of what happened, and today we will finally learn.
Erica,
yes, go ahead, Raphael.
Just interrupt you for a little bit. This is the mother of Dion Longworth. This is Elaine Scorsha from, she lives in Kentucky. That's Dion's sister. They're now entering the courtroom. Again, many folks were at lunch today, taking a break, not expecting the jury to come back so soon. Elaine Scorsha was in Kentucky on the night of the explosion. She tells us that she found out that her son, Dion Longworth, died on the way to Indianapolis.
Raphael.
They had found her son's body. Yes, Erica, go
Raphael,
ahead.
how many people exactly are we waiting for before this verdict can be read? Has the judge said how many people and who exactly have to be in the courtroom?
The judge did not give any indication to that. They could just be stragglers, per se. I think the important people that the judge only cares about, of course, is the defendant, Mark Ray Leonard, because he has constitutional rights, and then his attorneys have to be in the courtroom, the prosecution has to be in place, and then the jury. The jury really are the key people. If they're ready to speak, that's what he cares about. He's not going to take, he may consider whether all the parents are there, but the key players are those that are part of the legal process. He cannot control anyone else that's in the gallery. And so, again, we have a crew downstairs, and as soon as we begin hearing those verdicts, we'll bring them to you. But Eric, it's been just an emotional point for all these families.
I know we've been talking to the dads of both of the victims. How many families from the Richmond Hill subdivision have actually made their way to South Bend to follow this trial?
Well, at least 100 came up. The Marion County Prosecutor's Office was providing a shuttle during the early days, during, I believe, days 2 to 9, if I can keep track of my days, when there were Richmond Hill homeowners who came and testified. There was a shuttle that would bring people up, and that shuttle was provided to keep people on time. It is a long trip. You don't want people straggling around. Parking here in South Bend is not the best, so they wanted to make sure that everyone here got on time to testify. So throughout the trial, at least 100 came through, mostly as witnesses for the prosecution, but on a daily basis, who has been in the courtroom almost every day, of course, have been the fathers of Dion and Jennifer Longworth. They've been here. Their families have come in and out of the courtroom. The gallery has been mostly filled with media in the back taking notes. But of course, it's a long trip, and I think people really were just waiting for this day to come up and see exactly what was going to happen. So right now we have just maybe 7 or 8 of the homeowners that are in the courtroom, but I think a lot of people are waiting to see what we put out in our push alerts on Twitter and Facebook. They are really aware. As you can imagine, they know what's going on. They've been reading the blog that my colleague Jordan Fisher has been writing, and often they'll tell me, hey, did that really happen? So they know what's happening, and they just were waiting for this day. They may not be here physically, but in spirit, they're waiting to find out what happens with the latest in news coming up. The first verdict is a felony. I have the first verdict.
Go ahead.
The first verdict is guilty on felony murder. The first verdict in this case, count 1 against Mark Ray Leonard, is guilty. That is my colleague Derek Thomas, who is reporting that now he just stepped out of the courtroom to pass me his notes. Mark Ray Leonard on the first count of felony murder has been found guilty. We now have another 52 counts to follow, but that is a clear indication that if that's the first, then the others will just begin to follow in a massive avalanche that do not bode well for him. My colleague Derek Thomas will now join me. Derek, you just left the courtroom and you just passed me your phone. First verdict, felony murder, guilty.
Second, felony murder, guilty. And I heard the third, arson, guilty. So I'm going to be collecting information. I'm going to go back down right now. I look for a reaction from the fathers. John Longworth, he sat stoically, arm around his wife. I saw Jennifer Longworth's father, he sat stoically. The judge said he would not tolerate any outbursts. I'll be back downstairs, come back up with more information.
And if you sound a little bit out of breath, the courtroom is in the basement, so he is going to run up and back. We're allowed to have our cell phones in the courtroom, but we're just not allowed to transmit. So any information, someone has to run out and bring that out to us because we just cannot transmit. Again, as you heard from Derek Thomas, my colleague, in the case against Mark Ray Leonard, he is found guilty on the first 2 major counts, that is felony murder and, of course, 1 count of arson. But there are multiple counts of arson because of the number of homes that were damaged or destroyed in the Richmond Hill subdivision. Of course, my colleague Ann Kelly is also inside, so as we begin to hear the verdicts, Erica will bring them out to you. This jury only spent about 3 hours on this case, weighing the evidence. An hour yesterday, 2 hours today, and right after 12:30, people began running out from the courthouse saying, there is a verdict.